Hello, welcome to the DataFi Dynamic Atomic NFT workshop. In this workshop, we will build a atomic NFT that is a digital asset that's wrapped in a Permaweb application that's wrapped in a SmartWeave contract. This will enable us to add dynamic functionality within our digital asset. And the dynamic functionality we'll be adding is attention tracking. So every time a user views our asset, we will capture that unique uh, visitor count and increment that count. Um, about this workshop, what you'll need to know to get the most out of it is an understanding of blockchains and NFTs, full stack skills with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and some Arweave concepts, data storage, SmartWeave contracts. The tools we'll be using is Visual Studio Code, Node.js, Git, AR Local, which is a DevNet for the Arweave network. DataFi is a concept of bringing together and bundling several technologies in the Arweave ecosystem. The Arweave network is trustless, permissionless, and composable. And the composability allows us to take concepts and combine them together in ways to fulfill very unique use cases that I believe are only capable with a blockchain technology like Arweave. So we take concepts like the Permaweb, SmartWeave, Atomic NFTs, and PSTs, which are profit sharing tokens. And if any of these terminologies don't make a lot of sense, I'll leave in the show notes a link to what is Arweave that I go through each one of these describing in a little bit more detail what each one of the technologies are. So check that out if you don't understand uh, what these buzzwords mean. So let's jump into the workshop. You know, an NFT is basically a digital asset and a token, a single ownership token that is unique to that digital asset. And one of the pain points of the, kind of the legacy NFTs is that you store the token on a chain and the asset somewhere else. And if that somewhere else goes away, then the owner has the token, but they don't have the asset, or that asset could have changed. So, using technologies like Arweave and Atomic NFTs allows you to make sure that the asset and the token or the contract are the same transaction ID, which makes it impossible to separate between the two. Um, so, with that said, we can look at this kind of visual of an Arweave transaction kind of encapsulates the digital asset, the contract, the state of the contract, and attributes that make it easy to find these things. So, which therefore we have an atomic NFT. Now, in this workshop, what we're going to do, and I've already done step one, is clone this repo. So this repo is kind of set up with some pre-working code, so we don't have to type everything from scratch, um, and it'll help us. Um, I spelled dynamic there. I have to fix that, but it'll help us get started faster and really focus on, you know, essentially creating a digital asset within a Permaweb app, within a SmartWeave contract, and making that, uh, you know, functionality dynamic. Um, so clone that, and what we'll do is go over to our Visual Studio Code, and we can see that we have uh, two directories. We have an NFT directory and we have a warp directory. The NFT directory contains a Svelte app, and that app will actually compile down to a single HTML file. So this app will consist of our logic as well as um, uh, uh, Winston SVG, which will be our digital asset. And then we have the warp folder, and the warp folder has our scripts to essentially mint the NFT onto Arweave. And so what it's set up to do now out of the box is just mint the um, image. So it's going to take the image, which we did in a previous workshop, and just mint that with a SmartWeave contract. So it'll just take the digital asset and the SmartWeave contract and connect those together. And that kind of is an atomic NFT. Now we're going to build a dynamic atomic NFT. So we're going to put in between it a Permaweb app. And first step we want to do is install AR local. So we're going to go ahead and do that. We're going to say npm install -g for global, and then AR local. And that's going to install AR local for us. And AR local will allow us to um, write code and deploy everything to a DevNet so that we don't have to spend AR to work through these concepts. Um, so we'll run AR local, and now we'll just go ahead and test the current code and make sure everything works. So we'll go into our NFT folder. We'll do yarn, and then we'll do yarn build. And let's go ahead and just double check in the disk folder and make sure we have winston.svg. We do. Cool. And now let's go into the warp folder, and we're going to create a wallet. So we'll run node wallet.js, and that's going to create a wallet.json file for us to use. And it will go ahead and mint 100 AR. So we'll have enough AR in our DevNet to to deploy this uh, atomic NFT. So now that we've got our wallet, we're going to mint it. So we'll say node mint.js. And before I do that, just to let you know, so we can look at the contract, and this is the same contract we used in the previous workshop where we have our handle function, we have a balance, and we have a transfer function. So there's nothing different here. It's just the same contract. And then in our mint, same code as the previous workshop. We're connecting to Arweave, and then we're grabbing our wallet and our contract. We're deploying the contract or posting it to SmartWeave. Then we grab our NFT, our SVG file, and we deploy that to SmartWeave with an initial state for the Atomic NFT. And then we print out the contract ID. So that's what we're doing here. So if we run Mint, we get our ID, and we should be able to pop open um, our Arweave server right here, and we should be able to take this contract ID, this transaction ID. Sure, I get all of it, and just append it to this URL, and we should get our NFT, which is cool. So we've confirmed that everything is working from our GitHub checkout. Now, it's one thing that you may have to do if you're in Warp is just do a yarn before you run anything, and make sure that all your dependencies are installed. But with that, we've got our setup, right? So we've completed our setup. Now, what we want to do is make this dynamic. So instead of pulling the SVG, we want to pull the index.html. And in order for us to do that, what we have to do is essentially store the index.html, the Winston SVG on the Permaweb and get those IDs. And then we'll create a path um, manifest that contains both of those um, IDs, and that will be what we add to our smart contract. So the first thing we need to do is work in the Mint file, and we need to add, we've got our contract source, so we need to add the steps to create an image transaction for our SVG file and create an index transaction, and then modify the contract to change the data to a path manifest object or JSON file. So we're going to create an image transaction. Actually, create a HTML transaction, and then we're going to modify the data here to a path manifest file. And then we'll be able to deploy, but instead of deploying just the digital asset, we'll deploy it wrapped in our Permaweb app. So all of this should be fairly similar to what you've done in the past, because we're going to use the Arweave SDK. And the first thing we need to do is read in the image file. So we're going to say fs read file sync, and we're going to grab the image from NFT dist, and we have it here. So that's kind of cool. Winston.svg and UTF 8, because SVG file is text. Now we're going to create our transaction. So we'll say const image tx equals await Arweave create transaction, and our data will be our image. Now we need to add a tag. We just need to add one tag. So image tx add tag content type, and this is image svg plus XML. And that'll let our Arweave server know that this is an SVG file. Now we just need to sign it with our wallet and then post it. So we'll say await Arweave transactions, sign image TX in our JWK file, our wallet file. We'll say await Arweave transactions, post image transaction. And that will create our image transaction file. Now we need to do our HTML file. So we'll do HTML, FS read file sync, NFT dist index.html. And that is text as well. And then we'll create our HTML transaction, which will be await arweave.create transaction. Data will be our HTML file. And then we just need to set one tag. So it'll be HTML tx add tag content type text HTML. And then we can sign and post our transactions. This would be HTML transaction. And then post. So I know that we could create a little function to do this, but I'm kind of doing it in plain sight so you can kind of see exactly what's going on here. So we've taken our two files that we want to post on Arweave, and now we can get rid of that. And we want to change this data to be a path manifest. And I'm just going to do it in line here so we can save time. So with that, an Arweave path manifest, we start with the manifest property, and that is Arweave slash paths. And we have a version of 0.1.0, and we have an index of path index.html. And we have our paths as an object. And the first one is index.html, and it's going to have ID that'll be our HTML tx.id. Okay. Then we're going to have Winston.svg, and it's going to have an ID of image transaction.id. And that's our path manifest file. We're going to add as our source. Now we need to change a couple of these tags. First, we need to change our content type to be application x.arweave manifest plus JSON. So that's very important because the gateway server will recognize that and say, oh, this is a Permaweb app. I need to serve it based on this path manifest file. So I'm going to serve index.html as the root. And then it'll be able to find, our app will be able to find Winston.svg off of that root to embed that. So we got all that. Our state here, we can change our content type here to text.html. And that will let any exchange that supports dynamic atomic NFTs to know that this is an HTML NFT and to show it in an iframe. And then you can get the dynamic functionality from that by listing in exchange, um, which is pretty cool. Okay. Everything else is the same, and we're going to post it and all that. So I think we're good to go. Now, before we do that, we're going to go over um, to our Svelte app in the NFT folder, and we're just going to go yarn build and make sure that we have an index HTML, and you can see the size is large. So we have like all of our code inlined in the HTML file. So you can see here we've got all of our code, which is wonderful, awesome. And to verify that, let's go ahead and just run it, and we'll just use a little um, web browser. So we'll do npx w3 dist, and that'll run this little web browser on port 3000. We'll open in browser, and we should see our NFT, and we've got this little div here where we have number of unique visits. So we haven't added that functionality yet, but that's kind of an indicator that we're running an atomic NFT. And with that indicator, now it will tell us um, when we deploy this on AR local that we actually deployed the atomic NFT and not just the standalone NFT. So you'll notice that that div is not there. Cool. So let's do this. CD into our warp folder, and then we're going to run node mint.js. Cool. It's given us a new transaction identifier. So let's grab that. And let's go ahead and just to be sure, let's go ahead and mine our DevNet, and that'll make sure everything is processed, all the transactions. And then let's go here, and AR local still running. So we're going to remove that identifier, atomic NFT, to our dynamic atomic NFT. So if we paste this identifier and run it, we get our dynamic atomic NFT, but it's not finding our Winston file. So we did something wrong here. And let's see if we can't figure out what we did. So hopefully this won't take long, but it's trying to find Winston SVG. And it looks like it's routing right on the path. It's just looks like it's not there for some reason. Okay. So when we ran it here, it was good. The SVG is there. And if we look at our source app JS, it's just doing image source SVG. Um, I'm wondering if it's trying to go to the root. Maybe just real quick. So what I'm doing is adding a base so that like anything in the spelled app goes to the relative path and not the root. That could possibly be the issue. And let's go to warp and then mint. Check this one. Well, the good news is we're getting the HTML file, so that's really positive. Um, it's just not Winston SVG. Maybe I misspelled it or something. Let's look at our mint file and look here. We're building it. We call it Winston here. Then on the path, Winston.svg. Winston.svg. That looks right. Ah, that's a awesome. There we go. Cool. Now let's remint. Typos, right? They get you every time. And let's try this again. Let's do this one. Hey, awesome. So, and we've got a couple of things we want to make sure. So we've installed Arweave and Warp. So I want to make sure that we have Warp and we change the title to Winston Dynamic NFT. Cool. So I think we're good to go here. Um, what we want to do next is modify our contract to add some logic to capture attention. So we're going to have, well, let's start at the mint.js. So the first thing with the mint.js file is we want to change our state, and we're just going to add a new property called visits, and it's going to be an empty array. This will be our attention tracking state. So the length of that array will be the number of unique visits. Now we're going to go to our contract, and we're going to add two functions, a read function and a write function. The read function will be visits where we return the number of visits, and then the write function will be visit where we record the visit. And we'll say function visits. Of course, these functions are reducers, so they take state and action, or an accumulator and a value. And then we'll have function visit. And the visits are going to return the result. So this was pretty easy. We'll say return result state dot visits dot link, and that's it. That's our visits. Now our visit needs to actually increment it, and what we want to do is let me pull up. All right. So what we want to do is um, check and see if the caller address is already in the array, and then we do nothing. If it isn't, then we're going to append it to our array. So our visits array will be a list of addresses, which will represent our unique visitors. So we're going to say const caller. We're going to pull that out of action, and then we're going to just do a simple if statement and say if state dot visits dot includes caller and not. So if it doesn't, then what we're going to do is change state dot visits to equal this new array where we destructure the current array visits. So we put all the current items in there, and then we include the caller. So um, now we just return state. So that's our um, functionality to capture visits on the smart contract. And we'll deploy that contract with our new dynamic NFT. So we've got the contract done, and on the mint side, we've got our visits done. So everything is set up here. Now we just need to add our dynamic functionality in the app.svelte file. So we're going to change this static number of unique visits into a dynamic attention tracker, and it will be very cool, I think. Anyway, so you know, the way we're going to do this is we're going to make a call to the smart contract to get the number of visits. So um, in this div, I'll start this way. We'll add our presentation logic and then add our imperative logic to fill in that. So this div, we're going to do an await on our total visit count. And if it's not there, we're going to say loading just to give us an indicator. And then once it is there, we're going to get the visits um, value. And then we're going to say number of unique visits equals whatever number is in visits. So that's our presentation. Now in our script up here, we need to add some logic. And the first thing was we're going to add total, let total, and it's going to call our visits function that we're going to build. So let's go ahead and build our visits function. Now we've got Arweave. Um, we're going to need our warp module, which is a global module to access our contract. And we need our contract identifier, which is the window location of our NFT. So if we do window dot location path name, get our identifier, but we have this slash, so we just need to replace that slash. So we can do that by just doing a simple regex replace. So we'll get our contract that way. And then we need to use warp to initialize our smart contract. So we'll say const contract equals warp web, say warp dot warp web factory dot mem cached based, and we'll include Arweave. And then for our testing, we're going to use the Arweave gateway. So that'll point to our AR local, and we'll hit build, and then we'll select our contract. Now, when we move this to mainnet, we'll get rid of this, and we'll use the Redstone gateway. All right, so we've got that. Now we can create our visits function. So we'll say function visits, and we'll just say return contract view state and function. We'll call our function visits. And then that's going to return a result. So we'll say dot then result, and we'll just pop off the result property, which will be the value. So when we first load the app, it's going to call that contract and, you know, basically should get 0 the first time because there's nothing in the array, and return that and basically say the same thing. Number of unique visitors is 0. Now, second thing is we need to capture attention. So we're going to do that when uh, Svelte mounts the component. So we're going to bring in this on mount function from Svelte. Okay. And then we're going to call on mount to visit. And we just need to create that do visit function. So every time the component's mounted, it's going to call this do visit function. And it's going to be a sync do visit. And we're going to use session storage to store our wallet address. So if the user has already visited, we don't want to count it. We only want to count unique visitors for a given session. So you know, that way it'll be kind of, unique visitors for a session. And that way, if I visit today and then visit tomorrow in a new session, that would be kind of two unique visits. And this is just to demonstrate functionality, so it's not. Yeah, uh, it's a very naive implementation, I guess, is what I'm saying, just to kind of showcase the capability of doing a dynamic atomic NFT. Okay, so the reason I said that is that we want to check and see in sessions storage if the address exists. If it exists, then we're going to skip it. If it doesn't, we're going to say, let's get our wallet. And here we're going to generate a wallet from Arweave. And then we're going to get an address. Okay. Now we're going to save that in session storage. Okay. And now we're going to um, mint some AR. So in this, since we're running on DevNet, we can just give this wallet some AR. And now we're going to call the visit function in our contract. So we'll say await contract, and we need to connect our wallet. As a write interaction will require some AR. Now or requires a wallet. Um, in the mainnet, we would use bundle interaction. So bundle interaction would be um, would be free because it's smaller than 100 kilobytes. So we'll say visit. And then what we want to do in our development version is we want to mine this transaction so that it can be included in the evaluation of the number of visits. So we'll do mine. And then finally, we need to tell our UI that the visits have changed. So we'll say total equals visits. Like that. Cool. And I can just say let wallet. And warp is imported. So we import that here with this script tag. Brings in our warp. All right. Think we've got everything. Let's CD to the NFT folder and do yarn build. Cool. And then let's CD back to warp and do node mint.js. Okay. And now let's pull that up. AR local. Warp is not defined. Okay. So I think I know what's happening there. So basically, this is taking too long to run. So I'm going to move this script tag into index HTML. I was hoping I could leave it there so it'd just be one file, but doesn't look like that's going to happen. So let's move it to index HTML and let's put it in the header here so that it loads before our script loads. And then we'll save that. And we'll go back to NFT, do yarn build. And then we'll go back to warp, to node mint.js. And give it another shot. Cool. So we did get loading and we got a visit. Yay! Visit one. Now, if I refresh this, should get loading, get visit one, but I don't get visit two because of my session. Now, if I go to storage and session storage and delete this address, okay. Now, if I refresh, I should get one and then two. Sweet. So we've deployed a dynamic atomic NFT that's using its contract to essentially track unique visitors. All right. So now that completes this workshop on the DevNet, but I do want to know that I'll do a follow-up workshop that shows converting this to production because there are some changes that we need to make and deploy it to production. So I'll do an additional 15-minute workshop of listen. So now that we've got our dynamic NFT, how do we mint it on mainnet? All right. Thank you.